The point at which a person's savings first reach $100,000 rarely draws attention. There is no announcement and no celebration. It usually registers quietly on a screen as a balance that is crossed into six figures. For many who reach it, the number does not feel the way they expected. Its significance lies less in the amount itself than in what the amount demonstrates. A common assumption holds that the first $1 million is what alters a person's life. In practice, the more consequential shift occurs earlier. The first $100,000 is the stage at which money begins to behave differently. Financial thinking changes, and a person's longer-term prospects start to diverge from the path they were on. The reasons become clearer when the process is traced from its starting point. The early stage, building from nothing, is the most difficult. A person with no investments has only one source of growth: their own time and labor. Each dollar saved is one they earned and chose not to spend, with no accumulated capital working alongside them. At this stage, setbacks carry more weight. A single unexpected expense, a car repair, or a difficult month can erase visible progress.
For this reason, moving from $1,000 to $10,000 can feel close to impossible. The growth is slow and the progress hard to see. Moving from $10,000 to $50,000 tends to feel different as a pattern becomes recognizable and confidence builds. By the time savings approach $100,000, the effort begins to produce momentum, even though the work remains demanding. The more significant change, however, is in how a person thinks. Before reaching $100,000, financial questions tend to center on survival, covering the month, earning slightly more, meeting what is coming due. The underlying posture is defensive, shaped by scarcity. After that point, the questions shift toward protection and growth, toward preserving what has been built and finding ways to expand it. The time horizon lengthens from the next month to the coming decades. Decisions become less emotional, and the idea of opportunity cost becomes concrete, because every dollar spent is also a dollar that can no longer earn somewhere else. At this level, accumulated money begins to generate returns of its own. With $10,000 invested, the gains are modest enough that many savers dismiss them and disengage. $100,000 functions differently. At an average annual return of roughly 8%, that sum can produce in the range of $8,000 a year without additional labor. In effect, a second and smaller income. Such returns are not guaranteed. Markets rise and fall, and no figure is assured. Over years and decades, however, earnings accumulate on earlier earnings until invested capital contributes more than the person's direct effort. The first $100,000 is the point at which compounding becomes a measurable force rather than an abstraction.
As returns accumulate, a person's options widen. Before this stage, many tolerate work they dislike because they cannot absorb a gap in income, lose sleep over emergencies that could undo their finances, and pursue nearly every prospect that promises quick money out of necessity. With a financial cushion in place, an emergency becomes an inconvenience rather than a crisis. A person can decline the wrong job and wait for a better one, and can take a measured risk, whether starting a venture, learning a skill, or investing in their own capability, without facing complete collapse if it does not work. The money provides, above all, the capacity to choose. Certain habits tend to appear at this stage. Savers begin tracking their money more closely, investing on a consistent and often automatic schedule, and avoiding debt that serves no purpose. They direct money toward assets that generate income rather than liabilities that drain it, and they plan in terms of years rather than weeks. These are not specialized techniques so much as standard practices, and they commonly take hold around the first 100,000. This is also the stage at which the underlying purpose of saving becomes clearer. It was never primarily about possessions. It concerns time, the ability to determine one's own hours, to shape the day, and to exchange less of one's life for income. $100,000 does not make a person wealthy, but it restores a measure of control and room to maneuver that financial pressure tends to remove.
The same point carries a specific risk. On reaching $100,000, many conclude that they have arrived and respond by raising their standard of living with a more expensive car, carrying a monthly payment, a larger residence, and a general upgrade that feels earned. Expenses then expand
demand to absorb the progress that was made. This pattern, known as lifestyle inflation, is difficult precisely because it appears justified. Treating a single milestone as the finish line, a person can spend the cushion before it has time to grow, and the security, flexibility, and momentum erode. The result is a return toward the starting point, often unnoticed until it is complete. The distinction between reaching the first 100,000 and progressing toward $1 million is substantial. The first 100,000 is largely an exercise in discipline, in saving, learning, and establishing durable habits. It is slow and quiet, and it depends mainly on self-control. The stage that follows runs on different mechanisms: investing, acquiring assets, building businesses, and operating at scale. It is a matter of deploying capital rather than merely accumulating it, and it is accessible only to those who complete the first stage. What the first 100,000 ultimately provides is not luxury or status, but evidence. Proof that a person can build wealth from nothing and that a disciplined approach produces results. With that evidence comes a change in self-perception, from someone pursuing money to someone constructing systems that generate it. The balance itself matters less than the change in the person required to reach it. By this measure, the first 100,000 was never an endpoint. It is the stage at which a person learns what they are capable of becoming. The most difficult part is already behind them, and what remains is the question of what they will build with what they have established.